welcome back to That Dad Guy. It's October 30th, 2025, which means we are almost at the end of October, which also means that for Stamp of the Month, for the giveaway, you're running out of time. So if you're watching this almost in real time before the 31st, so today, you got to do it today. It's your last chance. Go to Stamp of the Month, go to the video that talks about planes on stamps, put in a comment in that video and that video alone with the keyword that I gave you in that video, and you'll have a chance to win tomorrow. Tomorrow is also the mail day. All the exciting mail that's come in through the week. I'll show you what has arrived, but we'll also do the giveaway. So that's exciting. That's happening tomorrow. But what's happening today is that we're looking at my father's stamp collection. We have been going through this book, The Americas. We're getting very close to the end of it. We are in the S's as we've been going through alphabetically. And today we are doing another grouping of stamps from this. Another country, another post office that issued stamps from the Americas. Anything but Canada and the US. That's what we've been talking about. So if you're interested, make sure you like, you subscribe, you leave positive comments, you share with other people, you put the notification bell on, and you hype the video so other people can see it as well. Well, let's get into today. We are talking about a territorial collective, not independent country. It's self-governing territorial overseas collective of France. And we're talking about something a little close to home. Getting close to Canada, really close to Canada. We're talking about Pierre and Miquelon. They are very small islands that are just off the coast of the province of Newfoundland, which means that it's only 16 kilometers from the coast of Newfoundland and only 10 kilometers from the nearest Canadian island, which is called Green Island, which is also part of the province of Newfoundland. But they are 2,373 kilometers away from France proper, the nearest populated city, which would be Brest, I guess. It has a population of 5,819 people. It is an 8-island archipelago and belongs to France now. Why do I say now? Because it has changed hands so many times, and you would think, well, what's the purpose? Why are these small islands off the coast of Newfoundland so important? Well, let's get into it. They were first discovered. Aboriginal people came and went, had been on those islands, but no one settled there. There were no evidence that anyone had been living there. And so the Portuguese arrived in 1520. They landed on the island and they named the islands 11,000 Virgins after the feast day of St. Ursula. Well, I'm glad that the islands didn't keep that name. They moved on a little bit. 1536, Jacques Cartier showed up, and for France, he claimed the islands. And at that point, they had been frequented by the Micmac people, which are local indigenous people, but they hadn't settled there. So the Bretons had brought some fishermen in, and they started to fish off those coasts. But it wasn't until 1670 that permanent settlers set up shop there. They called the island St. Pierre and Miquelon. By 1691, there were 22 people that were living there at the time. In 1713, okay, so we've gone through the 1500s, we've gone through the 1600s. Now, it becomes a little bit more important. In 1713, the Peace of Utrecht ceded the islands to Britain. St. Pierre became St. Peter because they had such a vivid imagination that they changed it that far. In 1763, 50 years later, the Treaty of Paris, Britain gave the fishing rights along the coast of Newfoundland, plus the islands of St. Pierre and Miquelon back. We're following it. 1763, this happens. 1778, you know what happens? France decides to help the United States in their little revolution. Britain doesn't like that. So in retaliation, Britain goes into St. Pierre and Miquelon, burns all the settlements to the ground. It takes the 2,000 people that are living there and deports them back to France. But by 1793, Britain put some settlers on the island. 1796, only 3 years later, Britain runs away from the islands. French ships were in the area. French ships went there. They burned all the settlements to the ground, becoming a common theme. In 1802, the Treaty of Amiens, the French take control of the islands once again. 1803, you know what happens? The Napoleonic Wars. So the Napoleonic Wars go from 1803 until about 1815, and Britain comes back in, takes over the islands. They're ours once again. France doesn't have them. They're Britain's once again. In 1814, France gets the islands back through the Treaty of Paris. But 1 year later, the 100-Day War starts between France and England. I'm getting to think that the French and English through history didn't get along so well. You're probably getting that too. So 100 Days War starts 1815. Guess what? Britain goes back in, takes over the island, burns everything to the ground. 1816, France returns, resettles the island, and it stays with France from there on in. But in 1903, the people in St. Pierre and Miquelon, they think about joining the United States. Can you imagine those islands go off and become part of the United States? Well, it didn't amount to anything, and they never did. In 1910, fisheries were very unprofitable, so the island's economy was very well hurt, and a lot of the population moved to Quebec, the province of Quebec, the province of Nova Scotia, leaving a very small settlement there. In 1914, France comes in and conscripts all the men that are able to fight in the First World War, which was about 400 men, 100 of which died. So only 300 returned, also crippling their fisheries because the women and older people that were left and children couldn't bring in the fishing catch that they had needed. In 1920, the economy has been, well, it's always been kind of this way, but definitely flips over and goes a bit further into smuggling because the U.S. Has prohibition, so they're not getting alcohol. So St. Pierre and Miquelon, perfect place to start smuggling alcohol into the United States. And that's what they do. By 1931, the New York Times says that 1.8 million gallons of whiskey, Canadian whiskey, are brought through from St. Pierre and Miquelon during a 12-month period. That's a lot of alcohol being smuggled in from that area. In 1941, during the Second World War, the island pledges allegiance to Free France, because France has been taken over by the Germans at this point. After the Second World War, 1946, France calls St. Pierre and Miquelon overseas territories. 1958, they get the choice of whether or not they want to join France and just be a part of France. They say no, they want to remain as a territory, an overseas territory. 1985, they become a territorial collective. Now, what does all this mean? All this means that fisheries is very important in the Canadian waters in that area of Newfoundland, so much so that cod fishing has also been very sought after. And having France only 10 kilometers away from the nearest Canadian territory means that those rights of who gets to fish there and what's considered international waters has been a bit of a debate for a long time. And a bit of a sticking point too, I think. Now, there are a lot of people that say, you know what, I love to go travel to France. And they go to St. Pierre and Miquelon because they say that when it's there, it's like going into France, wherever. I mean, they have the same currency. Their president is the president of France. Their language, of course, is French. And the culture, the bakeries, everything is very much France on this little island with a small population. And so one thing I thought was interesting, we go back when the population wasn't doing well because the fisheries weren't doing well in about the 1910s. I said population went to Quebec. That makes sense. Quebec is French speaking as well, so the French population would go there. Nova Scotia, there are some Acadians there. There are some French speakers there. But Newfoundland was right there. But I guess because Newfoundland was very English, the population decided not to immigrate there. Makes a bit of sense, but proximity-wise, they're right there. Anyways, that's St. Pierre and Miquelon. That is a bit of France that is right here in Canadian waters, or maybe we're in French waters, depending on how you want to look at it. And they produce some stamps. So my father has a page of the stamps, and I collected a page of the stamps. They're very popular items to collect at my local stamp show. Anytime I go to The auction tables, there's usually stamps from Stn Main. I haven't jumped on board to start collecting those because of so many other things that are out there, but I know there's one person here in Moncton, a former postie, and that's part of what he collects, just St. Pierre and Miquelon, and only has a couple stamps he's missing right now, and of course those are the very valuable ones. And best of luck to Alan. If you're watching this, I hope you get the final ones and complete the collection. But really cool stamps to collect, and I'm going to show you the ones that my father has put aside, and then I'll show you the ones that I've got. We'll start here with these, the sailing ship, and we now know that fishing and the oceans are very important to the economy in Stn Main, like the stamps, the series stamps with the dogs as well. But we now see why fishing, and you can see some fishermen here, are very important. You can also see that my father didn't put any Scott numbers on these pages. When he has a country with very few stamps in it, he doesn't usually put Scott numbers under them. It's a nice overprint one and another overprint one, but you can see all the things that are common with French stamps on there too. There's the page of my father's stamps. And here are the stamps that I've collected. So once again, we've got the sailing ships. Very common ones. I added a few of those in as well. So some duplication there. I really like this one here, early one, you can see with the French Republic in the corner, the fishing, the lighthouses, the settlements. Very common with a lot of the different overseas territories. There's another one of those dog stamps. And here you can see the map as well of St. Pierre and Miquelon in the middle, between the fishermen and the famous rock. Hard life being a fisherman. What do you think? Do you collect St. Pierre and Miquelon? Do you have some in your collection already? Maybe it's something that you're now interested in. I think of stamps like New Caledonia that are also French Republic stamps. They have a very similar look to them in the printing for all the overseas ones there. And I'm sure we're going to touch on many more that are like that too as we go throughout the years here. It's interesting, really interesting to see how there is something that binds the stamps, that tells the story of the history of the area, and also you can really tell that they're part of France and the French collective that are there. So great. Hopefully you enjoyed this storytelling, this little bit of history, and walk through a few stamps from Stn Pierre and Miquelon. You guys have a magical week. What, Polo? You say like, subscribe, share, and tell all your friends. Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? As we talk about islands in the Americas, my heart goes out to those people that have been affected by Hurricane Melissa, especially in Jamaica and Cuba and whoever else may be affected as the winds and rains continue as it moves on and moves up the coast.